Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome to Comic Book Radio. I'm your host, Peter Cimetti. This is episode 111. Tonight is a feedback forum night. It is a feedback Friday. And that means that if you need feedback on your comic-related project, come on the show, show me what you got, let's talk about it, and I'll do my best. I give advice based on things I do and would follow. So I'm never going to give you guys advice that I myself would not actually do. The focus tonight, if no one does come on the show, or if we have moments in between, we'll be talking about struggling to build your characters and world, simplify your storytelling. That's what I'll be talking about if we don't have anybody come on the show, or again, if we're waiting for people and we've got moments where we can talk about this. So before I do begin this, let's get that up here. I've got the link pinned to the top of the chat. If you guys want to join, please feel free to do so. Today we did not have a book delivery. So there was a miscommunication, I guess, with the printer. Not the printer, the shipper. So they had scheduled for today, but didn't schedule it with a truck that had a lift gate. And we need a lift gate on the truck. So, Monday it is. But the printer was awesome enough to do this. Now, they had sent proofs a while back, but they had actually, and I didn't think they were going to do this, they took one off the line of each book. And these are actually the books people will be getting. These are on newsprint. These are the books. These are right off the line. And you can see the newsprint. No glare or anything like that. It even, the proofs are really, they don't close. These close. These close nice. You know, nice and flat. So, on the way for Monday, Blood Realm 13, Red Koi 7, Unit 44 8, and Wolf and Batsy 8 and 9. Again, these are all on newsprint. These are the actual things. It's just one of each. And you can kind of see like the Easy Fold mailer in the corner. That's what these came in from the printer. They're not in the best of shape, but that's because, you know, they just kind of put them in there and send them out. But maybe you guys would think they're in great shape. Usually this is what I send reader copies. See how they've got kind of some of the dings and the dents and spine creasing and maybe sometimes even like a little ding in the corner or something like that. Can't sell those as mint. So we sell those as, depending on the level of damage, fine, you know, a couple creases, or reader copy, a little more beat up. So printer was nice enough to send those to us today. That was really cool. It would have been a bit ironic because we would have got the actual big delivery, but we didn't. So that's coming in on Monday, and then fulfillment begins. But over the weekend, I'm going to be printing up shipping labels, so everything, I can get a really good head start. As soon as those books get here on Monday, boom, pack them up, ship them all out Tuesday. Not all. Maybe 50 to 60 packages. But that's a pretty good start. Now, before I begin, I want to say hello to you guys. So, Comics Odyssey, what's up? Hope you're doing well. Thank you for your comment. This was at 1 o'clock today. Bobo Ayami, how you doing? Good to see you, Bobo. Cole King, what's up, Cole? Hope you're doing good. Thank you for being here. Johnny Slaction says, looking forward to this. It's going to be a good conversation whether anybody joins me or not. I've got a lot to talk about tonight, but I would prefer for people to join. We'll do roughly an hour or so still. It'd be great to see what you guys are working on. If you guys need any advice, any feedback, I'm happy to offer it. Seer says, happy Friday. What's up, Seer of All That Is Obvious? Hope you're doing well. Thank you for being here tonight. Paul in the chat as well says, looking forward to those books. Me too, man. Me too. It's easily a month past when I thought we would have them, but this time of year is strange, and I'm finding that certain production lines are still strange. Some of them have been really fast. So some of the stuff that, some of the merch and things like that we would order from certain avenues and companies get here like a week. Other things taking twice as long, 3 times as long. The printer, I thought that it would have been a little faster this time around. I'm glad that it's going to get here though, because once it's like Thanksgiving time, like that week before, man, does it really slow down at the printer. So I'm glad we got these and we can get them out to you guys. Looking forward to seeing what you guys think, and hopefully you enjoy them all. Andy Gogo, what's up, Andy Gogo? Hope you're doing well. We got Shrek PMC here tonight too. What's up, Shrek? Spaceman coming down from above on a Friday stream. Thank you, Spaceman. Johnny Slaction says, super excited for those Wolf and Batsy issues. There you go. Yes, 2 Wolf and Batsies, number 8 and number 9. Omni says, those comics are cool. How can I get a copy of Wolf and Batsy? You can go to alternacomics.com/pre-order if you want to get those. I'll show that up right now, because everything that's available for pre-order on Alterna site, you can go right to that link, alternacomics.com/pre-order, and check it out. And that includes King Cryptid number 5 to 9. That includes the Alterna winter apparel, all that good stuff. All right, let me bring it up right here to show you what I mean, and then I'll put the link in the chat. All right, so that's the pre-order page here. Everything else that's not in the pre-order page is in stock, and we'll ship that out. Unless, of course, it's out of stock, and it'll say it. Some items are out of stock, sometimes indefinitely or permanently. So here's the pre-order page. We've got the winter apparel, the beanie, the mug, all that good stuff. You see the hoodies, you see the blankets, and that's up and running until November 27th. Keep in mind that these are limited edition. We will not be going back to print with these. We'll print a little bit extra of the most popular pre-ordered items and sizes. So if the hoodies, we have no smalls, let's say, ordered of the King Cryptid hoodie. We got hoodie size small to 5XL. If no smalls get ordered, let's say, right? We're not going to order any. I'm not going to order any of those to have them for the site. If we get a lot of larges or extra larges or whatever, we'll order a little more of those sizes. The reason being, these are pretty expensive to print. I don't want to sit on anything that just ain't going to move. So if you want to guarantee your size, if you want to guarantee that you're going to get these specific items, please pre-order those before November 27th. That includes the blankets and whatnot too. If we don't get any, we got one order of each blanket. But if we didn't get any of King Cryptid, I would only make one for me. So that's how tight we're keeping these runs here. Only 2 or 3 maybe of the extras when we do print extras. And just like anything else with merch, we're not going to go back to print with it. So it's a one and done. So here's the comics, right? Blood Realm 13, Red Koi 7, etc., etc. So you got these on the site as well. You can pick these up still and pre-order them, along with keeping it easy if you want the 5 comic bundle, the digital, the Wolf and Batsy sticker, that kind of stuff. Once we fulfill like the Unit 44 short box, there's a couple extras of those. I'll list those on the site, but that's after fulfillment is done. So that's probably not going to get listed till sometime in December. Keep that in mind. King Cryptid 5 to 9 is available for pre-order on here. If you missed King Cryptid 1 to 4, you can get those in the new release section, or just go to the comics area in the single issue area, and it'll have that too. There's a bunch of other things on here, King Cryptid related from the campaign. Basically ports over all of the King Cryptid items there. Advertising spots that you guys can get. There's still a couple of those left. And then also various other things, 6x9 print, story script, trading card pack, King Cryptid all over print shirts. A lot of cool stuff for the King Cryptid campaign. And even sketch cards, sketch cover commissions, and that kind of thing too. So everything and anything pre-orderable is on alternacomics.com/pre-order. There you have it. All right. Norin Rad, what's up? Hope you're doing well. Put up the Ninja Turtles in the chat. Very nice. Very nice. Metatron says, for any alternate comics needs, and then puts up that link. Thank you, Metatron. Appreciate that. Mighty Joe says, hail, they're comics. They're all reader copies. But people want them nice and new, right? When they order them that way, and then, that's how they should be. That's how they should be. We're not going to sell. I'm not slabbing and selling alternate books at this point. I have no need for slabbed books. But if someone does want to go get theirs graded or whatever, and you want to do what you want, it's what you want to do. It's your book. You could do whatever you want to do with your book at that point. But I do hope you guys read them. And I know many of you, if not all of you, do, which is great. Manny Cornejo, what's up? Says, hail chat, how are you doing tonight? How are you doing, Manny? Hope you're doing well. And there is a link, of course, for the pre-order page. Omni says, I'm about to order me some comics now. There you go, Omni. There you go. Doing it right. Cole King says, while you're there, check out the King Cryptid campaign. And there it all is, too. Yeah, every single thing, again, on the pre-order. Every pre-orderable item is on there. We've got about 400 more, though, on the Alterna site. And you can order them all together if you'd like. There's even an option for separate shipping. You can have pre-orders ship later and in-stock items ship now. And that, of course, is a little bit extra of a shipping charge, but we'll do that for you. Shrek says, what's a slab book? Slabbed books are graded books. You'll see them. They're encased and graded with a number from like 0 to 10. I would say 1 to 10, but I've seen like a 0.5 and things like that. I don't think there is a 0. I think 0 is like the comic just doesn't exist. But even when a comic is in shreds, they'll still do some kind of grading to it. But that's a graded comic. Andy says, gotta buy 2, y'all. Pete's books are going to be worth a fortune. Thank you, Andy. Appreciate that. The thing is, you could buy 2. You could buy 2, and they're pretty much still going to be around or cheaper than many of the comics that are being made, even at the $225 price. Still very affordable. And thank you, Paul, for the explanation there to Shrek. All right. So, again, I've got the link pinned to the top of the chat if you guys do want to come on the show. If you're looking for feedback, advice, critique on your comic or comic-related project, I'll be here for an hour, and let's get that done. Again, though, if we don't have anybody joining tonight, the topic I do want to discuss is if you're struggling to build your characters and the world that you're creating, you got to simplify your storytelling. And what I mean by that is this. I'm finding a lot of people are going into creating their comic, and they're putting in so many elements into the whole thing, and not knowing where to start, not knowing how to start, and either overwhelming themselves or overwhelming the reader. You got to, and all of this advice is going to be very obvious, I hope, right? A lot of the advice I give on this show is obvious, but I find that there's people who don't realize it's obvious. So nothing about this is revelatory. It shouldn't be treated as such. I don't want it to be treated as such, and I hope it isn't treated as such. But what I mean by simplifying your storytelling, focus on character, not characters. Focus on your character. Focus on your setting. Focus on the actual thing that's occurring within. What is a conflict? What is the motivation of the character? Where are they? Who are they? What are they doing? Start answering those questions before you start making your story and putting it out there. It's so important. Piper was on last night talking about writing and editing and whatnot, and talking about coming up with backstory, coming up with basically a story Bible, which would help you and whoever you're working with. Because if you're not doing it all on your own, it's going to be important for you to be able to translate some of this or at least communicate it effectively enough to who you're working with. And if you don't know your characters, and if you don't know your setting, and you don't know your world, and you don't know any of this stuff, you're just kind of flying at the seat of your pants. It's going to be really difficult for you to not just explain it to the people you're working with, but it's going to be really difficult for you to explain it to the people who might be interested in buying your comic. And it's going to be difficult for you to communicate any of it within your comic. It's going to look like a big jumbled mess. So you want to make sure you're concentrating on simplification. Because if you're not simplifying your story, it doesn't mean you make a simple story. It means that the elements within, you focus on them one at a time. Think about it in terms of a lot of artists will talk about breaking down drawings into shapes, right? They're all just shapes. And then you start forming them, you build them up together, that kind of a thing. And it's the same thing when it comes to being a storyteller. If you're the writer, especially, and you're crafting this world, you're building up these elements. You can almost see them as shapes if you want, but you're building up all these various elements where you're putting them together cohesively. And as you do that, the old adage is that you don't write, you rewrite. So what I mean by that, and what that adage would mean, is that it's not like you just write it all and then it's done. Now you got to rewrite it, you got to revise it, probably rewrite it again. And then as you're doing that within that process, you'll find various things that you can call back to, that you can have, you'll see themes build up within that story, and you can play upon those themes. You can either push or pull certain elements, exaggerate others, focus on others, emphasize on it. And then you can actually build in characterization as you're doing that, focusing, of course, on the plot elements that are there and how those affect the characters and vice versa. So before you know it, because if you go into the story and you're looking at the whole thing, it's going to be very intimidating. It's the same thing that if you go into a drawing and you have an idea of what you want to draw, but instead of building up the drawing, you go into it and you got to be really skilled to do this. Holy smokes, there's only some people that could, and it's because they practiced a lot. Where someone can nail a certain aspect of the drawing and keep building upon it, like Junji Ito kind of a thing, but not a lot of people could do that. Most people need to kind of build up the composition, that kind of a thing, and then start focusing on certain elements and build up relatively equally and not just get zoned in on one aspect. So when it comes to the simplifying of storytelling, you want to make sure that you are building up these elements, but you also want to make sure you're taking things one step at a time. You want to make sure that you understand your character. Who's your main character? What are they about? What are they after? What's their personality like? Do you understand how they would react in certain situations with certain people and in certain conflicts, that kind of a thing? And you don't have to know everything about them, because you'll discover more and more about them as you move on and tell your story and other things occur. But you do have to understand to some level how they're going to behave with a certain problem, a certain person, another personality type. You also have to emphasize who you're going to develop further than others. So like in King Cryptid, when we meet him, he's pretty much completely a developed being. For the most part, there's not a lot about his personality that's really going to change. Now, like any three-dimensional fleshed out character or individual, he's going to have moments where it seems like he's contradicting himself, and he's going to be put in situations where he has to make a hard decision, just like we all do. And sometimes you'll feel like he's compromising his morals, or he's compromising a stance that he felt on something, but because now new information has entered his life, or he's put in a predicament where he has to do that because the outcome is perhaps better for those around him, or maybe himself, if he is to do that, and it's a survival mechanism, that kind of a thing. So it depends upon what situation that he's being put in. But for the most part, his personality, his morality, who he is, that kind of thing, is pretty constant. But there's characters around him that we just don't know as much about yet. And there's characters around him that are going to be developing through the course of that series. So it's the same thing for everybody's series. Now, you might have a character who's a main character that's going on a character arc. They're gonna end very differently, or they're gonna go through a lot of ups and downs and changes and a lot of development and a lot of shaping who they are, and that's great. There's a lot of really awesome stories like that, and then you might have side characters that do the same, or you might have side characters that don't really get developed. How you develop those characters is up to you, and how that plays into your story. But when I see people going into it and it's a constant new character, constant new place, new development, and everything kind of ends in the middle. Nothing is really getting fleshed out. There's no progression in story. There's barely any progression in plot, which means there's almost no progression in character. So everything constantly feels stilted. And people, I think, are getting very intimidated by developing these things. Because when you develop these characters, when you have them do something, when you have story elements play out, when you have a sense of something finite that has occurred, it feels a little intimidating. If everything is in a constant state of flux and it's a big giant moldable piece of clay at all points of time, and it's never, it's like an oil painting, it's never really done, there's a little bit of security to that, because you're never making your decision and then having to live with it as a storyteller. But what happens though is that you end up having a story that feels like it doesn't matter, and you have a story that feels like it's going nowhere. So you have to make decisions, and you have to deal with them, and you have to have characters respond accordingly. But you can't just throw every element in there and think that more is more, and that's great, and that, it'll impress the reader. Most likely it's going to really drive the reader crazy, and probably yourself too. So it's better to pace yourself, pace the story, and develop aspects of that story. You only have so much room, you only have so many panels on a page, and you only have so much time to tell that story as effectively as you want. So if you're going into it and you're essentially saying, I'm going to put everything in there, why would you do that? Why would you want to rush that? You can build upon that with more stories down the line. So take your time, focus on certain elements, focus on certain aspects with characters, and build them up accordingly. But yeah, there's a lot of people I find, and it's not just an indie thing. If anything, I see this happen a lot more in comics that deal with universes. So you see it happen a lot more at the big two, where it feels like a lot of the characters, and I'm gonna stick to the past 20 years with this, because it feels like a lot of the characters are transient. They're just there and then they're gone. They're not really properly fleshed out. They're kind of forced upon you, and you got to make an adjustment to understanding who they are, but they're not fleshed out enough so you don't really understand who they are. And then they're kind of boosted ahead of established characters instead of working their way, which is how it used to be, working their way into the story and playing off of the established character until it was you could tell the readers would respond accordingly. The readers would respond, letting the creators know and the editor know, or whatever it is, that they enjoy this character, they like that story, they want to see more of, they have questions about that character. Because always make it so that the reader's going to be asking questions. Even if you go in there, when I had Razor Fist on, he made a really great remark about, I forget who the name of the individual was, but it was the person who had adapted the Blade Runner screenplay, and was saying how the answer to the question is dumb. So don't try to get to the answer. You want to make sure that the questions are there. And every single time a question is answered, you want to have at least one or two more that arise because of that question being answered. But you can't do an endless loop of constant mystery box type questions over and over again too. You have to have some kind of answer for things. You have to have some kind of, again, there's the finite aspect I'm talking about, and committing to something. No, not Philip K. Dick. Philip K. Dick did not write the screenplay to Blade Runner. Philip K. Dick wrote the source material, though, which barely resembles Blade Runner, oddly enough. But so making sure that there's a lot of questions within, but not so many questions too. That's the thing. You got to find a balance. And I know for a lot of people, it sounds like, man, this is confusing stuff. You know, you got to have a lot of questions, but not too many questions. You got to make sure you're focusing on certain elements, but you got to make sure you're also building things up equally. The thing is, when you're telling your story, all of these various questions will arise, and you get to pick and choose how you answer them. Because every single thing within your storytelling is answering a question over and over and over again without you realizing you're posing those questions. Some questions, though, you're going to be coming across them because you have to answer them. And you're going to sit back and go, maybe I shouldn't answer that one just yet. Maybe that one I should hold off because that could play down the line, and we'll explore that later. You know, you don't have to think about it like when you meet someone for the first time, because that's what your readers are doing. They're meeting your book, your characters for the first time. You don't just go into it and every single thing in that first conversation, you know that whole entire person's life story. And if you ever met someone who was kind of an oversharer, you know the overwhelming feeling of what it's like when they will tell you their whole life story as soon as they meet you. And that's difficult. That's difficult to deal with, to take in all of that information right away. So some things you don't need to say. You don't need to explain. Some things you might say, but you won't explain them because they are what they are for now, and we'll get to that later. And then other things, whatever is most pertinent to the matter at hand, to the conflict within the story, to the situation being presented, you'll feel the need, okay, we'll answer some of this. We'll dive deeper to get to those answers. But do your best to show the answer as opposed to telling it. It's one thing to tell it later on as like a recap. It's one thing to explore it later on and reference it previously. But when you are uncovering and revealing or solving those questions and making those answers known for the first time, you really want to make sure it's more about showing than about telling. So, yeah, sometimes it's too much too fast. Absolutely. But that's the thing, is that I find there's a lot of storytellers that struggle with this aspect because they have a big story to tell, which is great. That's great that you've got a big story to tell. But you really want to boil that down to what's important and what's relevant and that you could fit into the story you want to make. Another thing too, what happens when you do that, you're actually able to benefit from it. So what I mean by this is the bigger your story is, the bigger the scope of that story, the more time it's going to take to tell, the more pages you need. If you're hiring an artist, the bigger that budget's going to need to be, the more capable that artist might need to be, so their page rate's going to be higher. But also, the more time it's going to take. So even if you're making the art, the more time it's going to take for you to tell that whole entire story. But if you're boiling it down more to telling almost like vignettes of stories and explaining, treat it almost like you're breaking your whole larger story down into chapters or short stories. That's essentially the whole point of what an ongoing series is. The mini-series is taking a complete story and you chop it up into segments, into acts, more or less. Not so much chapters or short stories. But the bigger ongoing, where it almost feels like, when does it end? I don't really know when it ends. It ends, I guess, when we get canceled or no one wants to read it anymore. You're then taking the big entirety of that scope. Almost think of it as if, and in this instance, you're kind of like a god over the world, and at any moment in time, you can just turn a page and reference a point in time. So if you were to view the entire scope of the history of mankind, let's say, not even the history of just everything, but just the history of mankind in itself, and you can turn to a page, either in the past or in the future. That's what it's like being a storyteller. So what pages are you turning to? Which chapter are you opening up to? What story are you focusing on first? Are you going to start in the very beginning? Are you going to start towards the end and then tell the story backwards? Are you going to start in the middle and reference the past while also realizing that you can have all these stories ahead for the future? There's all kinds of different decisions at that level that have to be made too. So having your frame of reference for where you're starting and where you're going to allow perspective to exist for your characters, that also matters a lot. So your scope is determined by all those things. So how big is your story? Well, your story could be as big as anything. Could be epic. But you still have to focus that story and dwindle it down to not just what chapter, what day are you focusing on even, but what minute, sometimes what second. Because as you're breaking down, and this is specifically for comics, as you're breaking down that story, panels are snapshots in time. Snapshots in time. So it doesn't matter if that one panel is here and then the next panel is 5 minutes later. You're taking a snapshot in time from panel to panel. So you have to break down that epic scope of a story into the various seconds that are playing out, and which second do you show? Which one matters? Which one is important for that story? Which one is worth telling? If you were to tell someone about the entirety of your day, let's say, don't even think about your life, just your day, just today, which moments do you pick and choose to talk about? Do you tell them every single aspect, every single second, every thought, every little thing you did? Or do you pick and choose? Is there a hierarchy? Or do you tell it linearly? Do you start with what was most important and the biggest event of the day? Something big happened today, and you just talk about that? Or do you start with, so today I woke up and the alarm went off and I put on my slippers and I went to the bathroom and then I turned on the light, put on the heat, started up some coffee. Like, how are you telling your story? So it's different. Because if you jump around and you pick what's important to tell, and that's the part where it can take time understanding what is important to tell. There's some storytellers that, man, everything is in there. And some people like that. I'm not really for that. You got to be really, really, really talented. And usually that doesn't work so well in comics. It works better in a prose novel. But even then, you got to be not just prosaic with your text. You got to be poetic as well, because otherwise, that's gonna be rough. That's gonna be a snooze fest. So when it comes to the comic, when it comes to what that's about, what is the key driver in your comic? Is it the conflict? Is it some kind of a genre? Are you working within the context of a certain specific genre? Because then again, you want to play up to the strengths of what that genre is. Otherwise, if you say your book is a horror book, let's say, and there's next to nothing horror about it, why are you saying it's a horror book? So maybe you need to redefine what that book actually is, or study up more on what makes horror. And it doesn't mean you have to rely on cliches, but you have to understand what it is you're doing. The more you understand what it is you're doing, the easier the reader's going to understand what it is you're doing, and the easier when it comes to playing out misdirection and giving a surprise or a twist or certain developments within the story and within the character, the easier that's going to be to pull off. And you want to try to pull that off as daft as you possibly can, in terms of not looking at it like, wow, I don't know if this person really knows what they're doing. You want to actually go into it looking like you know what you're doing. You're familiar with it. If you come across not understanding, it's going to be tough. Again, I'm going to put the link in here. If you guys do want to join, please feel free to do so. There's the link in the chat. It might be pinned still to the top of the chat. Hey, AL, what's up? Thank you for being here tonight. Hi, Lord Zart. You didn't miss too much. I just showed off some of the Alterna books and whatnot before we had started. They didn't arrive here today, but the big shipment didn't arrive. But some of just the print samples off the line, the printer had sent those in advance. Those arrived, and that was kind of fun to see. I didn't expect that. Real JBC says, I just finished my first live stream. Look at that. Says, go check it out after this live stream, of course. That's awesome, man. Casual nerdery. Very nice. That's great. Let's see here. Shrek says, I don't have facilities to go on a live stream. I suppose I could use my phone. Maybe another time. No pressure. No worries. I'm here for you guys for the hour. So if you guys have art to show, questions about storytelling, whatever it may be, and if you can't join, you can't join. If you got questions in the chat, post them in the chat. Feel free. Shrek says character building has not been much of a barrier for me. Narration, music, sound effects are a big problem for me. Personally, when it comes to sound effects, I use them sparingly, only when it really applies to the sound is so great that it impacts the art. So if I've seen some people go into it and they get sound effect crazy. Every little thing, footsteps are sound effects. Turning a doorknob is sound effects. It gets a little ridiculous. So I personally go into it with when it impacts the surroundings. So it's a sound that is so tremendous that it needs to be shown. It needs to be shown because it is being felt by the characters. As far as narration goes, it depends on the kind of story you're telling. I mean, some stories benefit from it, some stories don't, and some writers are good at it, some writers aren't. And it depends, again, what kind of narration are you talking about? Is it going to be from the first person main character? Is it going to be a third person narration? Is it going to be this kind of... are you talking in narration where it's like a flashback? Or are you talking more like it's a narration of someone that is outside of this universe? So more of like a true narrator. And music, interesting. Music for comics. That I've seen that kind of play out. I usually kind of cringe when there's people that make like music comics. I can't get into it. It's usually just the lyrics of things, and that's the biggest thing I can't get into when it comes to people putting that kind of stuff together. You could tell a comic about musicians, but I think when it comes to putting in music like that, like how would you communicate that within the comic? I don't think anyone's found a great way for it yet. I haven't seen anybody. Like how would you communicate if you did a comic about Beethoven? How would you communicate him playing the Moonlight Sonata? That's tough. Even if you're familiar with it, the only way that would work, you could do a record and book kind of thing, music that accompanies, and then you like turn the page, boop, the way they had that for the longest time. But as far as building it into the comic without something else to help you as an audio aid, I don't really know if that's possible. I've never seen that done well. I've seen people try, and it just, to me, I don't think there's any need for it. Brian, what's up, Brian? Hope you're doing well. Thank you for being here tonight, man. Appreciate that. Let's see here. Any questions in the chat? Dale says, J.J. Abrams, take notes. Yeah, endless mystery boxes, right? Endless mystery boxes. Good grief. And yes, thank you. Yeah, there it is. There's the screen writers of Blade Runner. Let's see. Yeah, overcoming barriers to intent. Yeah, something along those lines. Every character has their intentions, and how do they overcome or not overcome those things that are in their way from achieving those goals, from achieving their intentions. And that goes for both protagonists, antagonists, good, evil. There's no morality necessarily that needs to play out for this type of element to exist. If anything, I would argue that every single character in every story, for the most part, has this. If they don't, if everyone's just getting everything they want, that you could tell that story. Man, you got to find a way to tell that story in an interesting fashion that doesn't depend upon any sort of conflict whatsoever. It's just kind of like Everybody is just, it's almost like a dream. I don't know how relatable it would be to see everybody getting everything they want. I don't know how much that story would resonate, but yeah, every story there's always something where something's preventing someone from getting what they want. And what that is, how serious that is, what it is that they want, does it have to do with taking something away from what someone else wants? There's all kinds of ways to define that and zero in on telling that story. Sheldon says, I ruined a few first dates when I just flooded verbally. It happens. It happens. If as a storyteller you become more of a nervous talker than anything, and you start spilling the beans, you start giving away the surprises and the spoilers, and you over explain, and you end up ruining any of those questions that the reader might be interested in finding out more later. That's difficult too. I talked about this before, where there's negative space in art. That's easy to understand for the most part. It's not positive space. Positive space is what the focal point is of the image, what you're drawing, what you're trying to ascertain. So negative space, let's break it down to light and dark. So shadow creates form. So the shadow is the negative space that creates the positive space of form. Same thing with your storytelling in your writing. You need negative space. You need that negative space. You need the shadow there to create the form of your story. And what you're creating out of that is what the reader sees. The same way that in negative space, that's not supposed to be what the reader sees. The reader's supposed to see the positive space. You could play on that, of course, and really get something great out of it. But if you're going to tell a story, you can't have just all positive space. You have all positive space, what happens is you essentially just end up having an unbelievably busy piece, or possibly even just a complete one color. Because there's no negative space to define the form that you're trying to define. So it's too busy, it's too much, and it's overwhelming. And it looks like nothing, and it comes across like nothing. There's so much of it, there's nothing. I know that's kind of like a paradox, but that's what happens. So in the same way with art and negative space, you need writing and negative space. You need storytelling with negative space. You need stuff where you're leaving out certain pieces of information, generally on purpose, because that creates the form of the story. It creates intrigue. It creates interest. It makes the reader ask questions. All those questions that we were talking about before. And if you're a good writer, you know what questions you're putting out there. And even the best of writers sometimes aren't aware, and they go back and go, oh, that's a question. Why is that character there or doing that or wanting that? I didn't really identify that at the time. I didn't think too much about it. And then they can go back and explore that later on. But if you're a clueless writer, if you're a bad storyteller, you're not doing any of that necessarily intentionally. And so you'll never actually answer any of those questions because you don't even realize that you're asking them, and that the story is also asking them of you. And that as the writer, as a storyteller, you have to answer some of those. So what happens is that you end up, as a reader, when you're reading something from a bad writer, you're reading something that you're endlessly confused. And it never feels purposeful, because it isn't. It feels like you're just there, listening to the lunatic ranting and ravings of a crazy person. Because they don't know where they're going. You just got in the car with a psycho. Congrats. Where they take you? Hell, they don't even know. So that's what that's like when you get on board with a storyteller who is like, I got ideas. I got lots of ideas. That's when you go, okay, you can let me off right here. I'm good. I don't want to be in this car anymore. And I've experienced that a lot. I've experienced that a lot as a publisher with people who they got ideas, but they don't know how to execute those ideas, and they have next to no knowledge or desire to learn how. So They just end up shooting ideas at you. It's like everyone's got ideas, but the ideas are great, but you got to understand how to execute them. You got to understand how to bring those to life, and not just bring them to life, but bring them to life in a successful way that you're communicating that information solidly and interestingly. So, it's again, if this was easy stuff, everybody would be doing it. And if there was one way to do it that guaranteed success, everyone would just do that one way. I hear it a lot. I hear it a lot with, oh, so-and-so did it like this, so I'm going to do it just like them. All right, but you're not going to necessarily have the same success they had. And it goes for everything, So spend more time trying to fully develop what it is that you want to focus on, and you'll have far more success with that than trying to necessarily emulate everything that you think is that you like, everything that's come before, and say, well, if I just rip off the head of that toy and I put the head of my own character on it, then it'll be great. There's a lot of people out there that are playing with other people's toys, and they're ripping the heads off and just putting the heads on all over the place, switching them up and going, new character. So it's tough to do, but it takes time to flesh out all those things. And it's a process. It really is. And it's far from easy when you start developing. It's easy to have the ideas. It's easy to have the fleeting moment of, oh yeah, I think that sounds cool. Or that character I think would be, if they were like this, that would be great. But now fully fleshing that character out and giving them not just a personality but also a story, so that they can showcase that personality and get that point across without you telling the reader that this is how they are. So if you introduce a character and you tell the reader in exposition or however else, this character is tough and strong, or whatever. Any adjective you could throw at them. Yeah, okay. They're tough and strong, and they're brave and heroic and whatever. Why don't you just show them to be tough and strong and brave and heroic? And then you don't have to have that awkward explanation saying what they are or saying how they feel. Show how they feel. Show who they are, as opposed to having them explain it or say it. That's so awkward, right? Imagine meeting somebody and you're like, hello, my name is whatever, and I am a fantastic individual. I am quite heroic and brave. It just sounds a little weird, doesn't it? It sounds a little weird. We don't all just greet each other that way, with listing off various adjectives of who we are and what we believe ourselves to be. It takes time. Again, though, it takes time. So within fiction, of course, you have the godlike ability to put these characters in situations that will showcase their personality. So you don't have to wait. You don't have to spend too much time. You put them right in a situation that shows the audience who they are. And hopefully, if you're doing a good enough job, you're communicating that. Xgal, what's up? Hope you're doing well. Thank you for being here tonight. Metatron says, waking up before the alarm is annoying. I've been doing that this whole week because of the stupid time change. As human beings, talk about having godlike powers. As human beings, we have the ability to not necessarily dictate what time should be, even though I guess if you want to get really existential and metaphysical with it, we kind of do. But we at least have the ability to say what time is what. So, and we show that with this daylight savings stuff. So we put the clocks back forward. I can't tell you how many people think that daylight savings time is now. Not that this is standard time and daylight savings time ended. Anyway, but so we put the clocks back forward in the spring, and we're like, oh look, so much more daylight. It's really just it's the daylight is relative. It's just we've changed the interval. So Then when it gets darker naturally, we decide to put it back. We should put it another hour ahead and then leave it. I like more daylight when it's 5 or 6 or 7 o'clock at night, as opposed to, maybe some people are like, oh yeah, but then it may be darker in the morning. That's just me. I digress. But yeah, all week long, waking up weird hours, and sleep schedules are weird, all that. It takes like a couple weeks usually to adjust. Norin says, I have such lofty goals with my stories. They are all connected and span genres, but I'm starting out as small as I can with the first story. Bravo to you, sir. Bravo to you. That's how you got to do it. Build it up. You don't got to just just puke all over the audience with your story and be like, you like it? Is it good? Like, I don't know. You just puked all over us, man. You want to kind of spit on the audience, not just a big old puke. You want to tell that story as focused as you can, and build up. I think it comes from an insecurity that people feel like they're not going to have enough time, or they're not going to be able to tell the story they want to tell at the scope in which they want to tell it. I think that's part of it, to be honest. I think, especially too in the day and age of the comic industry being an absolute mess, especially in the traditional market, where most books probably should be canceled by issue 3, because almost no one's really making money at that point anymore. It's really difficult to get in there and feel comfortable telling a longer story. So you're more feeling like you're in a rush to get to the good stuff, right? And every issue should be the good stuff, first of all. But it's a strange system now more than ever. I mean, if a new series were to debut today, does it even get to the numbers that were required to bring on some of the most iconic characters we ever saw? I don't think so. I mean, it took... And some people love this character, some people don't. But either way, this character has become iconic. It took a very long time to get to Venom, to get to Deadpool, to get to... I mean, Harley Quinn debuted in the animated series, but it still took a very long time to get to her. Do we really have that kind of time anymore? It feels like a lot of characters nowadays that are introduced are kind of forced upon the audience, and some of them maybe are well received or liked, but they're still forced in such a way that it seems like they didn't really get much time to develop. Even to this day, I mean, I was never much of a fan. He didn't really appeal much to me. But Miles Morales feels like a relatively unnecessary character. And I know some people really like Miles. I don't know much about him, to be honest. And I never cared to know much about him. It just seemed like Spider-Man guy from the Ultimate Universe and stuff. I didn't care much for the Ultimate Universe either. But some people really like Miles, which is great. But I don't even know how Miles got his powers, and that's on me. But I think a lot of people know Peter Parker got bit by a radioactive spider. I don't know Miles' rogues gallery, but he's a popular character. So it's things like that where, is he really being given the opportunity to fully develop in the way that he could? Where on the other hand, I see Terry McGinnis, Batman Beyond, had a lot of opportunity to develop as his own character with his own motivations, his own backstory, his own, and a lot of people know and understand that character too, because it's just, oh, that's horrible. Miles has the same story in Rogues Gallery as Spider-Man. That's what I'm talking about. That's horrible. That's horrible. He should have a different... He doesn't even have something like, he went in for some kind of procedure and got genetically altered or something. You got to be kidding me, Eric. You're not kidding? I'm going to look this up after the show. I believe you, but I got to see this for myself. You see, now that would be kind of interesting. Like if Peter Parker was Man Spider, right? Remember Man Spider? And went on a, and then he bit poor Miles Morales or something like that, right? Bit, scratched, whatever. Kind of like a werewolf thing, And then that's what gave him his powers. That's interesting. Because also now Peter has done that to him. More guilt for Peter Parker. Guilt is like a driving force for that character. Is what you just made up there. I like that a lot more, Sheldon. And I'm sure there's a lot of other ways that could have been explained. I can't believe that. Really, it's the same. Okay. So characters need to be fleshed out and be given their own opportunities to come into their own. Otherwise, they will forever live in the shadow of whoever else it is that, I think that's the only thing that makes Nightwing so popular, too. Nightwing, you get him stepping into his own. One of the few characters that seem to progress age-wise and story-wise and character-wise. But, let's see. Eric says he fights Peter's villains, got bit by Peter's spider, and had the same powers. And he also has some of Spider-Woman's powers. Holy crap. Okay. I believe you. I got to look this up for myself, though. But I believe you. Man, oh man. Okay. So, anyway, yeah, when it comes to creating characters like that, fully fleshing them out, giving them their own rogues gallery, their own point of reference, their own backstory, something even sometimes similar but different. That could have been done and was done for the very, very long time. But it seems like a lot of the modern characters nowadays really, it doesn't go that way. Let's see, we got 1 minute. All right, 1 minute. Wait a second. Now you're joking with me, Jefferson. Miles can turn invisible. This whole stream now is going to become you guys trolling me on the powers of Miles Morales. Miles can't turn invisible. Come on. You're joking with me, Jefferson. I appreciate the joke. I think Miles was also a super fan to Spider-Man and looked up to him too, wanting to follow in his footsteps. Eric says that's why I don't like Miles. Man. Oh my lord. Are you serious, Jefferson? Guys, is Jefferson serious? Miles can also turn invisible? Liza Bar says, I like that Miles had the power of Thor for a while. Eric says Miles can turn invisible. He has an electric power called Venom. Okay. All right. I'm at a loss. Like I said, I know relatively next to nothing about Miles Morales. Relatively next to nothing. That's so bad. That's really bad. That's really bad. Holy smokes, I'm speechless. You guys have left me speechless. You're all saying this is true. This is true. Wow. I really can't believe it. All right. All right. I believe you guys. Okay. I'm going to still look it up because that's just the kind of person I am. But holy smokes. All right. So just in short, to wrap it up before we go. I don't know how anybody's reading a lot of that stuff nowadays, though, to be honest. That sounds like torture. Um, Simplifying your story structure, simplifying your characters, boiling them down to their core essence. All right. That is something also that's very important. Very important because that is actually what has occurred through the various incarnations of characters that were successful. Relatively successful because they were able to maintain the core essence of what made that character that character. If you don't really know what the core essence of that character is, if you can't really define that character relatively simply, sentence or two, work on that. Work on doing that. It'll really help you to shape your stories. It'll help you to put them in those characters in certain predicaments that make it easier to tell those stories. The thing with a lot of this, though, man, now I believe it. I believe a lot of this stuff. I've been seeing this for years, and I'll wrap it up with this. As a publisher, I've been seeing people look towards the big two, and this is why I had to stop with submissions. I've been seeing people look towards the big two a lot lately, and try to emulate. They look to them. That's the standard bearer, and they look to them at modern day them. And then they'll send something to me, and I can clearly see that that's what they're inspired by. That's what they think is great. And people got to start being more comfortable referencing what they believe to be great based on their own personal tastes and what speaks to them and resonates with them, as opposed to what they think is great because it's currently out there. And that's something as well that it takes time, and it takes not being relatively new to this, I think, to understand. You gotta be more comfortable with who you are, and able to before you're able to tell those stories like that. But man, that stuff about Miles, man, has me spinning. Good grief. That's very strange. Eric says, I personally prefer King Cryptid over Spider-Man. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, Miguel O'Hara, to Spider-Man 2099. Like, that's a far better character. It should have just stuck with him. It should have just kind of brought him in, and that there was some kind of time slip, and that brought Miguel O'Hara into present day. Maybe they've done that by now. I don't know. But that's what they should have done. Would have made way more sense. Yeah. That's honestly, it was one of the only 2099s that I really enjoyed. I kind of enjoyed Doom and Ghost Rider 2099. Punisher was like, it was just basically Judge Dredd, but that was kind of enjoyable too. I thought the X-Men was all over the place. The X-Men 2099, I just could never get into that. But Spidey 2099, I really loved. I dug that series. But holy smokes. Yeah, so you guys got me rocking at the end there. Anyway, thank you guys so much for being here tonight. Really appreciate it. If you're a storyteller, you're out there, if you got anything out of this, great. I'm glad you did. And if you're just trying to get your story out, and you're just trying to do what you got to do to take this big epic thing in your head and put it to paper, try to get that story down as much as you can before you think about formatting it then into a comic. Because if you start putting that story down into comic format and you're not necessarily even knowing what's going to happen in that story, you're going to run into a lot of problems. So I would really suggest break it down. In film, they call make a treatment. Usually that's just a couple of pages at most of what the story is. The main story beats and that kind of thing, and what certain characters are doing and certain events and how they develop. Give your comic a treatment. Maybe it's just a page or two, but write that story down. Get those story beats down, and then break it down further. So even when it comes to simplifying your storytelling, simplify how you would actually write even that script, whether it's for yourself or a script that you're going to be giving to others. That's an important step too. So yeah, other than that, man, oh man, thank you guys so much. Really appreciate you guys being here. I did not care for Ravage 2099. I know Rob Geronimo enjoyed Ravage 2099. I just could never get into that character. But yeah, everybody take it easy. Hope you're doing well. I'll be back. Let's see. Oh yeah, actually, I'll be back tomorrow night. Art T. Bear was supposed to be on tonight. He's now going to be on tomorrow. So I'll be back tomorrow night at 9 o'clock Eastern with Art T. Bear. And then I'll be back Sunday night with the comic who loves comics, Frankie Paul. If you guys follow him on Twitter, he's always posting up all these great old school comic shots and whatnot. And the dude really loves and appreciates comics. And we'll just have a nice, fun conversation about the comics of yesteryear and the days of yore. So that'll be a fun show on Sunday night. But everybody, I'll see you guys tomorrow, 9 o'clock Eastern. Hope you guys take it easy till then. Have a great night and an even better tomorrow. See you guys.